What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're excited to have you guys with us today on the Diesel Podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube and aren't subscribed, make sure and click the subscribe button, like, comment, let us know what you think about the episode. If there's a particular guest or topic that you'd like to have on the podcast, we're always checking your comments on there and love to be able to take what you guys suggest and then be able to turn them into future episodes. Today I'm going to be joined by Fred from Zonar Systems, and I wanted to talk with him about fleet management for diesel vehicles and then also some huge challenges that are coming up in the industry in different states and maybe even nationally. So I wanted to get more insights from him, learn more about the challenges that fleet managers and company owners face, and then also some other challenges that are going to be coming down the road and how they anticipate that playing out and how they can help people. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. Before we get to today's podcast, I want to remind you guys our friends over at Kershaw Knives have a 20% off site-wide code for you. So if you use code 23diesel20, at kershaw.kaiusa.com. It's a great way to save some money, get some really cool gear. So if you're in the market for a knife for hunting, fishing, EDC at home, at the job site, they've definitely got you covered with a whole bunch of choices for knives. 2023 has been a huge year for them. They've had a ton of new releases. One of the newest ones are the Duralock models, which the blade's made out of D2 steel. The way that it opens and closes is super smooth, very positive, and there's different choices for blade shape and then also handle design as well. So if you're in the market, definitely make sure and head on over to their website and use code 23diesel20 for 20% off site-wide. All right, let's get to today's podcast with Fred and chatting with him about managing diesel fleets, some challenges that are coming up in the market, and how he sees it all playing out. Fred, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. I'm looking forward to chatting with you today about a part of the diesel community or diesel industry that we haven't focused on a lot, but I've had listeners tell me, hey, Patrick, I love listening to Cummins Duramax Power Stroke stuff, but I also am involved in fleets or I'm involved in the heavy duty side of it. It'd be really cool to hear about that side of the industry. So I know you're an expert in that field, and I look forward to chatting with you today and learning some more.
Well, thanks for having us. Happy to be here.
The fleet side, I don't know a whole lot about it. I've had some guests that have told me that they have, customers that have 10, 20, maybe even more. But I'm really curious in 2023, what are some challenges that fleet owners have? What do you do? How do you help them? How does it all come together with what you do and then being able to help this part of the industry?
Yeah, well, my company, Zonar Systems, we do, electronic fleet management things. And so we try to make it more efficient for all of our customers. And I think, in the coming years, certainly the bigger things are what's going on around the diesel trucks and diesel powered engines and what's happening with that. There's certainly a push to try to get rid of diesel. And I think both you and I know that there's not enough alternative powered vehicles to fill that gap, and certainly there's not enough power grid infrastructure, what have you, to do it from an electric standpoint. So I think in their goal of trying to get rid of diesel is far-fetched right now. And I think you're starting to see that. The CEO of Ford made a comment about the electric vehicles and not being able to drive across country on it, and a real eye opener for them. And they're going to start looking at different things too. So I think diesel will be around for a while. I think the state that's really pushing some of that is California, and other states are picking up on it. But I think your listeners need to get involved in some of that and really try to curb what's going on in the industry. But as far as what to look for, I mean, obviously diesel prices are sky high, and going to continue there. So how can you use your efficiencies and what you do in your own business to try to curb some of those expenses? And certainly maintenance is one of them. And and it's so important to maintain the vehicles, not only for the safety aspect but for that efficiency as well.
I imagine that time is the most important commodity involved in this, because if I think of maintenance, I think of downtime, availability of things. So being able to maybe streamline a maintenance program, you had mentioned like electronic fleet management. So being able to do things electronically, which could be quicker. So is that one of the big things that the industry is facing, is just time and maximizing it to keep things as efficient as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at the trucking industry itself, And even the construction industry, um, uptime is the most important, right? Because if the wheels aren't turning, you're not going to make any money, and that's really what it's about. So having the ability to know what your fleet's doing and to monitor that, we have something that we call a fault IQ, and it's really so if there's any fault that's thrown on a vehicle, you know you know what that fault is. You know if you should stop. You should know if you could keep going to go somewhere to get it fixed and make sure that you don't have that downtime. And the other aspect of it is when you do go down, now how do you fix it? Do you send a truck out, go see if it needs something, that you don't have with you on the truck, and then you go back to the shop and that sort of thing. And if you know the faults and the issues that are taking place, you can be ready for that. But prior to that, really the maintenance aspect of it, we do what we call an electronic vehicle inspection report, and you scan a tag, it tells you what to inspect around a vehicle, and if there's a defect, it electronically gets sent back to the back office, and so that in your management systems, you can know what's going on with your fleets, what needs to be fixed, where your mileage is at, all that stuff to ensure that your fleet is ready to roll. And I think that knowing that your fleet's safe and knowing that you're not going to get bogged down at roadside is really important.
And being able, I imagine, to take that information and electronically transmit it to a team or a structure is so critical, because I think without that in place, it's somebody saying, "Hey, I got to check engine light on my truck," and then you call in and you're telling them, "Oh, I got it creates all these roadblocks in the process." Versus electronically, it can get it from the guy operating the truck all the way through the entire structure to be able to solve the problem.
Exactly. I mean, it's like the old days of when you would get a fault code, you'd have to look it up in the book. What's that fault code for? What do I got to work on? What do I got to fix? Well, we do that electronically. So that maintenance guy that's in the back shop, once they know that something's been thrown, they know what it is and they can read into it, and you don't have to plug into it. That's right at your fingertips to really take care of it. And so that things have really progressed, and my expertise certainly isn't in diesel mechanics or anything like that. It's in the fleet management systems world. But when you don't know that you have to update your engine, Cummins engines typically need to be updated every 2 years. We have an app for that, like they always say, right? So we work with Cummins. Cummins read our box, and that driver or the maintenance person, you pull the vehicle over, you log on the app, scan the QR code, and update your engine sitting there. You don't have to go into the garage. You don't have to do any of that. So that type of electronic know-how is out there right now. Not just us, but there's others as well that know how to use those resources, so you don't have that downtime bringing your truck into the office or into the mechanic shop and getting stuff fixed, and having guys go out and try to take care of stuff, but doing it before it happens is really important.
I bet that it's really, especially critical now I know a big part of our chat today is going to be focused around carbon emissions and how it affects fleets and things like that, but how much electronic control there is on newer vehicles to meet the standards of the day. And I imagine that electronic side is incredibly important because there's more components on the truck, that more things are being monitored. It's looking for more information than it used to 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah, all that stuff. So the ECU is so important. It's vital to what we do as a telematics company. And every manufacturer, every OEM has a different language, if you will, for their ECU and the data that they put out. But there's certain data that has to be the same that we're able to read. And that, you mentioned CARB. That's one way to address that is on the fly, utilizing that telematics data to capture it and send it back to CARB for the approval of that check. And if your listeners don't know, I mean, CARB is going on in more than just one state, but obviously California started it. And so, starting next year, if your vehicle is 14,000 gross or higher, and you're in California, you have to have it checked by CARB.
The side of CARB that we've heard about on the truck side has been about setting standards for the aftermarket. and I had seen, I don't remember exactly when this was, but it really piqued my interest about some things the state of California was doing with semi trucks and vehicles that are in that weight range. And I started to think or relate it to just my basic knowledge of logistics. And I think of how does product get from point A to point B, food, all the things that people use on a daily basis. And I thought this is really important. This is something that I want to learn more about and how it's affecting the industry. I wanted to ask you about that particular side of it, what they're trying to do, what their goal is with different sources of power for vehicles, and how that's affecting fleets, or the diesel side, or the kind of the thing that we're chatting about today. How is that? Help me understand that a little bit better.
Yeah, so the carb requirement is for vehicles 2013 and older. So you're right. I mean, it's toward the newer side, and certainly they're putting more stricter requirements on the new builds as well. But fleets are looking at reorganizing what they're doing and how they do it. I mean, if you think about electric, the batteries are heavier. So that means you have less tonnage that you can take on the truck because you're only allowed to haul 80,000. California has some exemptions for it because of the heavy batteries, but so that's having impact. And what you see really in the real estate, it affects everybody. It's a trickle down thing. You see in the real estate market is a lot of the warehouses that are taking place. They're being built, and that's because they're meeting that last 100 miles of delivery. So they had to curb how far they can go because of the ability to do that. And now they're looking at different ways to deliver all these goods that we order, at our to our home. They've had to reevaluate on all those routes that they've had previously that they're doing now. So that's a big aspect of it. But the carb testing, they're trying to reduce emissions. It's all about the climate control, all that aspect to it. But what CARB has done is they've tied it into Department of Motor Vehicle Licensing. So when you renew your registration, that's tied to that truck. So if you're 14,000 pounds over, you're going to get notification that you have to have a carb test. And how you do that is either with, if you have a fleet, you want to have a telematics provider do it through the OBD2 connection and do it on the fly, or you have to bring your vehicle in to that literally get tested, plug into it, and they do a test and make sure that it's good. Right now, they're sending out letters in January of 2024, and then in July in 2024 they're going to start enforcing it. And so you have to get a carb test every 2 years on that vehicle that is over 14,000 pounds. That makes an impact on you when if you have to bring it into a shop. It's like we're talking about breakdowns and whatnot. You don't really want to spend that time doing that. You'd rather just have somebody do it electronically and send it and get your approval back over the air. And so that's what we've sent our information in to be a certified provider for that, because we know the other states are doing it. We know Washington and Oregon have already enacted carb requirements. There's some states on the East Coast that have done it as well. So this stuff is starting to flow through the country, and we'll see it impact others across the country as well.
That's a really big part of it. Is sometimes what I'll hear from listeners is they'll say, well, I don't live in California. I don't care what they do there. And it's been a challenge to try to connect the dots to how that spreads to other states. So on the fleet side and what you're doing, you're actually seeing these other states that aren't in California that are adopting either all or parts of it. And so that's why it matters so much. And I imagine for fleets, like you mentioned with time, having to go someplace and send 100 trucks or 50 trucks to go test, or just doing it on the fly, is it's a huge benefit to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges for us, and what I do for our company and regulatory affairs work is really understanding where that is going. And all you have to do is watch what's going on in California. Well, it doesn't matter if it's carb or other things. It all starts to flow across the country, unfortunately. but really keeping a track of that, because our fleets are across North America, and so it impacts them no matter where they're at. So we want to make sure that we're ahead of that. And so, yes, it doesn't matter what state you're in. Eventually, it'll impact you, especially if you're a fleet and you're delivering goods and you're crossing state lines. There's no doubt about it that it's going to impact you.
What are some common questions that companies, fleet managers would ask you or do ask you now about either managing their fleet better or streamlining it, or about the topic that we're chatting about with testing, emissions testing, and meeting standards? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, so when it comes to carbs, the questions, are just getting to know it, because it's fairly new, even though it's enacting, and unless you actually live in California, really not paying that close of attention. And quite frankly, fleets that operate in California don't really pay attention to it either, and because we're all guilty of that. We don't really want to listen to the noise, but the noise can impact you.
Yeah.
And so really helping them understand who it applies to, and why and what they can do about it. And then understanding that you don't have to bring your truck into the bay to get it checked. You can actually do it on the fly. But the companies that are going to be certified to do that, you need to check the certified list. And it's not published yet, it's coming. But there's a number of companies like ours that have applied to certify. So those are usually the tests. And then the other aspect of what do they ask is typically how do you combine the compliance to the regulatory side to meet those things to make that safe for your company, and how that impacts the bottom line and makes you really more efficient. And when you're talking about drivers' hours of service and maintenance and all those different things, how can you combine all that into one screen for your guy to look at, or your gal to look at, to know what's going on with your fleet, whether it's 3 vehicles or 300 vehicles. Staying on top of that and those operating the vehicle is really important. So those are the type of things that we work through with our customer base and help them be more efficient.
I just thought of a question. You mentioned whether you have 3 vehicles or 300. I'm thinking about the smaller number for a second. So I'm sure we got some guys listening that own construction companies or other things where they got 3, 5, 10 trucks.
Yeah.
What sort of benefit to the bottom line can they get with management like this? Because I think in 2023, with costs, overhead, all the things that are going on, business owners are looking for ways to be more efficient, to save money, but also maintain quality, lower downtime, a lot of other factors. What does it mean for the smaller fleets with being able to manage and streamline the process, like you mentioned?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, the larger fleets have, safety directors, and they have dispatchers, and they probably have a tech field that, helps them with all. And when you get down to, less than 10, you have one person running the entire operation and probably driving at the same time, right? So being able to provide something that is useful, that they don't have to touch it more than once, so if you have 10 trucks, you're not looking at 10 different types of receipts or bills or whatever. You're getting all that maintenance done in one pane of glass, and we help you work through that. That's probably the bigger part, is trying to reduce that stress and that work, so you can actually deal with all the other things that you're dealing with. And then knowing when your service is due, making sure that it's done right. Is your drivers doing their pre and post trips inspections as they're required to? Are they working their hours of service like they're required to? All those things you have to worry about as a manager and owner of those 10 vehicles. Now you have it in one place, rather than different things being handed into you, and you're trying to resource through all that, and set up your fleet maintenance time. Because if you have a small fleet like that, you may not be doing your own maintenance, and if you are, then you probably have 1 or 2 guys or gals doing the maintenance for you. So having them up to speed on what to look for and how to manage that as well is really important. Fuel is one of the most expensive parts of running the fleet. So being able to maintain that too, and knowing where they're fueling up, knowing their routes, having all that done electronically so you can help the driver. It all adds to that efficiency aspect of it.
It's really interesting. The other day, I was browsing through social media and I saw it's a diesel shop that we follow, and it was a fleet truck. I don't know if it was an F450 or 550, but they had the cab off and it said the result of 19,000 miles of no maintenance. And the engine's toast. So they've got to put a whole new engine in this truck, which isn't cheap. They might not be able to get it really quick. And I was thinking about our chat today and what we were going to talk about. And I thought of that application where the person who's operating it may not, their specialty might be something completely different. They might not know the ins and outs of the truck. They're doing electrical or plumbing or some other service, some other expertise they have. And so being able to stay on top of that to avoid the cab off of a truck and a $10,000-$15,000 engine would be huge for a smaller business.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do a lot of work with the vocational side of the house, whether it's construction or utility or whatever. And they're operators; they're not truck drivers. Their specialty is when they get to the field.
Yeah.
To do their work, not getting to the field. So when you can help them prep and be ready to drive to the field to where they need to go, and get them there safely and home safely, that's what it's about, and having that done more efficiently. And you're right, they need to know they have to check the oil and that, or walk around the truck and check the tires and turn signals and lights. That may sound really basic, but when you're focused on what your real job is, and that's being an operator or running machinery or climbing poles or whatever it is, you're not thinking about what it takes to get that truck there safely.
That's the biggest thing that I've learned in doing the podcast for as long as we have, is the maintenance side. It was always something in the background for me, and I was younger too, so I didn't really pay attention to that stuff. There were other parts of the truck side that I liked. But I've realized how crucial that is. And I think of an individual truck with when you're doing your oil changes, your differentials, all that. But then if I expand that and somebody said, Patrick, you need to manage 10 of these trucks, I would be overwhelmed. What if I go to 20 or 50 or 100? I would want something to be able to help me do that. And so I see how this is a really critical part of the heavy use market, the fleet market, the people who are sending tons of these things out there to be able to perform a service. So I think being able to understand how it applies to the big, huge fleets, but then also the smaller ones as well, who one day may grow into those big fleets, it really resonates.
We all have the mobile phone, and there are apps to help you be more efficient that ties into your back office. So even though you may not be at your back office to look at it, you can do it on your mobile phone and look at your back office and know what's going on, and have that resource right at your fingertips as well. So things have transpired to the point where, things are so mobile, and it sounds, for me, it sounds kind of silly, that we can manage our fleet, through an app or through a phone or through the back office, but really it will help you make more efficiencies throughout your business, and help you succeed further. And quite frankly, if we don't succeed, our customers don't succeed. So it's imperative on us to make sure that we do it right and help them do it right. Otherwise, we're not going to keep going in what we're doing too.
That's a great analogy, because I was just thinking it's hard for me to manage myself. That's why I use apps, so I have a reminder when something's coming up. I have to be here. I have to do this. Well, I'm not as complex as a truck and all the different components to it and 10 other trucks. So I definitely understand that. Now, if you were to look towards the future a little bit and things that are going on, it could be with emissions or just changes in the market. What do you think some challenges are going to be that fleet managers are going to face over the next couple of years or 5 years as they manage their fleet of trucks?
Yeah, I think emissions are going to be the bigger part of it. It's interesting, through the different, and if you don't believe that politics plays in all this, then you're sleeping under a rock somewhere, because politics does play in everything that we do and how we thrive as a country, and so things kind of will change, I think, as different administrations come in and come out. But I think that emissions will always be a forefront now. and how we can be more efficient with cutting emissions. So I think it will always be there. And then it's going to be, you know, managing whether you go to EV, you stay with diesel, you go to an alternative fuel, or how you do that to make your fleet the most effective. You know, certainly if you have, you know, 3 to 10 trucks, you know, that could be a fairly easy decision based upon where you might be. Maybe you need, you know, 3 electric trucks and then, you know, the rest diesel. So I think that's where it's going to be is merging some of that technology and helping you be more effective, not just with one type of vehicle, but more than one. And I think that's what you'll see is there's going to have to be more than one to make it work.
So it's going to get even more complex if I think of, say, 10 trucks and I've got 3 EVs, maybe a couple gas vehicles, and then diesel. Now I've got to manage 3 different types of applications. I'm going to need even more help.
Correct. and that's where I think it's going. And you know, and you know, the emissions, and we talked about CARB a little bit, and I'm going to read this because this is important. So if you have listeners in California, you know, CARB is creating an ACF Advisory Group. It's Advanced Clean Fleets Group, and because you're required now to purchase zero emission trucks if your fleet has 50 or more trucks, or make 50 million more annually a year. And that's by January 2024. So if you're active in California and you're concerned about what's going on with some of this stuff, I would look at getting in that advisory group as well and try to make that impact. The other thing is get to know what's going on with the industry, especially with the emissions side of it. And, you know, there for a while, the autonomous stuff was really big, and it still is to a certain degree. But all this emissions and the electric side is probably taking that over now. So I think in the next year, that's going to be the bigger aspect for a fleet manager.
I'm thinking of the fleet manager. Maybe it's smaller, they haven't paid attention, and they are in California. To make sure I understand this correctly, so by January of next year, which is 4 or 5 months away, they have to purchase, if they're over that 50 vehicles or they make 50 million or more, you have to purchase zero emissions vehicles. Yeah. So I wonder, are there even vehicles available that are zero emissions in those segments to be able to do that?
Well, I don't think so. Not enough anyway, and certainly there's not enough electrical grids and to keep those vehicles going either. And you know, and that's the thing is, if you have a semi truck, you know, an 18-wheeled truck that's electric, you know, to power that up in 24 hours, it's the same energy that it take. I think they said 38 homes in a city. So you know, one truck. 38 homes. Wow. Think about some of the electrical outages they've had in Texas and California and some of the problems that has caused. I mean, there's so much that infrastructure that's not ready.
Yeah.
So that's why I've said in the beginning when we started was I don't think diesel's going away, and you know, I don't think it'll go away in a long time. But there's ways to make diesel more efficient, and I think you've seen that over the years, and certainly in the trucking industry, they've made it a lot cleaner than it used to be. But for that manager, whether it's 3 trucks or 300 trucks, I think you really need to listen to what's going on with this part of the industry and know how to respond to it, and how can you be more efficient, not only with your fuel. I mean, we have an app for Z Fuel to help a driver do better operating the vehicle so they reduce the fuel usage. But it's very important. I mean, know how to save money just by your actions, your maintenance, and the way that you drive the vehicle.
I think that getting involved is a really key part that you mentioned, because we get that question a lot anytime we've covered anything related to emissions or things that can impact what sort of vehicles we can buy. As people say, well, what can I do? And I think being involved, and I think it's a great resource that you'd mentioned, of being able to give input and say, hey, I don't know if we can achieve this in the next 4 months. This is what I think as a fleet manager, or this is where we're at with our process. Being able to have a dialogue there is incredibly important. Now, I know there's going to be this topic is so complex and there's so many different directions to go. And I do know we have fleet managers who listen. And I'm sure I didn't ask you a question that they want to know about, or maybe they're curious about being able to manage their fleets better. How can they get in contact with you guys, learn more, see what kind of solutions that you guys can provide for them, their company, and their fleets?
Well, we'll go back to this electronic discussion, right? So go to our website at zonarsystems.com, and there's a lot of information there. And I'm on LinkedIn. Fred Fackema, Fakkema. You can find me on LinkedIn, and then I do a lot of work on social media, on Twitter, and what we're doing, and it's Zonar compliance is the thing for Twitter, and so. Follow us, find us, reach out to us. I have a team of experts that will be willing to work with the companies and help them get more efficient. And some companies that have reached out to me and to my team, we've helped, and they may not have gone with our product. They've gone with someone else, but they still reach out to us for information and what's going on and what's new. And that's what it's about, is to make people more efficient and effective and help where we can. So,
yeah, I think getting the information is the hardest part of kind of the modern world and the modern business world. Is just, where do you go to find the information? Where can you access it quickly, and time being the most important commodity. So I think being able to find a partner in that is so crucial. And this definitely helped me learn more about issues that are facing, say, a different side of diesel or automotive, but they ultimately end up with truck owners, everyday people. It always kind of, it inevitably goes that way. So I think being able to understand it at these stages can help the truck enthusiast who's listening right now and thinking, what's going to be, what's the future look like? What are some things I might have to do? So I appreciate your time. It was really great to connect with you, help me understand and learn more. And I think
I really appreciate you bringing us on, and we're happy to come back on anytime. If other questions lead to a different topic, we're not happy to jump on with you again.
Awesome. I appreciate your time today, Fred.
All right. Take care. Thanks, all.
Don't forget, diesel fans, make sure and head on over to Kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code 23diesel20 for 20% off site-wide. It's a great way to save some money, get some really cool gear for EDC or hunting, fishing, at work, at home. And they've had a ton of new releases in 2023. One of the newest models are the Duralock models, which the blade's made out of D2 steel. The way that it opens and closes is really smooth and positive, and there's different choices for blade shape and also handle design as well. So if you're in the market, definitely make sure, head on over, check them out, and use code 23diesel20 for 20% off site-wide. I also want to give a shout out to some of our Patreon supporters: Tyler Loewen at 23 Diesel, J. Cole John, all of our other Patreon supporters, all of you who subscribe on YouTube and podcast apps, follow us on social media. We appreciate all your support here in Year 7 of the Diesel Podcast, and look forward to bringing you more of the content that you want to hear in 2023. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.